We live in a world where Pat Buchanan and the Christian Coalition are powerful, if not consistently ascendant. So I worried that I might be revealing elements of Friedan's past that conservatives could use to discredit not only Friedan, but the entire women's movement. End of quote. This is from page 10 in this book. Well, anyways, no one seriously believes that people who reveal their communist past these days have anything to fear from the American government or society. Angela Davis, for example, was the Communist Party's candidate for vice president and served the Soviet Empire until its very last gasp. Her punishment for this is to have been appointed one of only 7 president's professors at the state-run University of California, and to be officially invited at exorbitant fees by college administrations all across the country to give ceremonial speeches on public occasions, including twice to U of O, and once she spoke at Holt Center in Eugene. Betty Friedan was not a suburban housewife when she wrote her book, but a 25-year veteran of professional journalism in the communist left, where she had been indoctrinated in the politics of the woman question, and specifically the idea that women were oppressed. Not at all a neophyte when it came to the woman question. The phrase itself, by the way, is a Marxist construction. She was certainly familiar with the writings of Marx, Engels, and Lenin on the subject, and had written about it herself as a journalist for the official publication of the communist-controlled media. She was a professional Marxist ideologue. Betty Friedan has been exposed as a fraud. Feminism deserves such a matriarch. These are words of Daniel Flynn from his book called Intellectual Morons: How Ideology Makes Smart People Fall for Stupid Ideas, published in year 2004, page 229. Moreover, what I want to add here is that in her rather candid autobiography, My Life So Far, published in year 2000, Friedan says that no matter what she did, her mother made her feel, and I quote, messy, clumsy, inadequate, bad, naughty, ugly. This is from page 26 in this book. Friedan spent years in psychoanalysis, and I quote, talking endlessly about how I hated my mother and how she had killed my father. This is from page 121. Also, all mothers should be drowned at birth, she used to say in her 20s, page 31. Also, ostracized by her classmates, Friedan vowed that, I quote, they may not like me, but one day they are going to have to look up to me. Well, people like Friedan prefer to change the world rather than heal themselves, deal with their own personal problems. They tend to do very well by what they think is doing good. Boredom plays a role here as well. It is impossible to observe radical feminists without thinking that their assertions of oppression and victimization, their never-ending search for fresh grievances, are ways of giving meaning to lives that would otherwise seem sterile to them. Self-pity and envy are also undoubtedly factors, says Judge Robert Bork in his book Slouching Toward Gomorrah, page 10. The Friedans of this world, some very nasty women, some very ugly feminists, or as the New York Times describes them, and I quote, by the standards of the time, unlovely, is a classic communist popular front, subversive movement today. Well, that's much about Friedan. Another such, by the standards of the time, unlovely woman is, of course, Gloria Steinem. Well, Steinem's most dazzling accomplishment was coming up with the saying that I quoted last time. She said, "A woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle." But she also has always maintained that she is a leftist radical. When I was in college, it was the McCarthy era, she told in one interview in 1997, and that made me a Marxist. Well, she also collaborated with the CIA, ratted on comrades, and helped to provoke riots. Later, Steinem joined the so-called Democratic Socialists of America. She served as, and still serves, I think, as an honorary chair of the Democratic Socialists of America, which boasts as being the largest socialist organization in the United States. And she became media darling due to her CIA connections. And MS magazine, which she edited for many years, was actually indirectly funded by the CIA. And she coined two phrases that we can hear everywhere today: reproductive freedom and pro-choice. And actually in the 1980s, she dated Henry Kissinger. Well, some consider Gloria Steinem probably the second most influential feminist leader after Friedan, but myself, I don't find her interesting, so I better skip her and better talk about Andrea Rita Dworkin from the New Left, who was a militant feminist, once described as the Malcolm X of the women's movement. She was called provocative icon of the women's movement by Adam Bernstein in Washington Post obituary when she finally expired a few years ago. She was also called a spearhead of radical feminism by the British Guardian. "I am a radical feminist," she said of herself, "not the fun kind." She was the real thing, said Catherine Weiner of The Guardian in obituary. Well, Andrea Dworkin was perhaps the archetype of what Rush Limbaugh termed feminazi. Born to a Jewish family in Camden, New Jersey, she was embroiled in controversy from an early age. In the obituary after her death, the Washington Post writer Adam Bernstein said, and I quote, "Encouraged by her socially conscious father, Ms. Dworkin embraced dissent at an early age. She refused to sing Christmas carols in elementary schools, and by sixth grade decided she wanted to change restrictive abortion laws." Well, it is not likely that an 11-year-old girl like, oh my God, would worry unencouraged about abortion laws. Well, Andrea Dworkin said in her memoirs, I have here her memoirs, that she had indeed a very good relationship with her father, whom she credits with introducing her to the world of ideas. In her own words, he was a committed, dedicated socialist and inspired her political leanings. Also, in one interview, Dworkin described her Jewish childhood as being in many ways dominated by family memories of the Holocaust. At a time when the subject was simply not mentioned, Dworkin says she was obsessed with that subject. And I quote her, "I have been very involved in trying to learn about the Holocaust and trying to understand it, which is probably pointless," she said. "I have read Holocaust material, you might say compulsively, over a lifetime. I have been doing that since I was a kid." This is from her interview in The Guardian on April 12, 2005. No, this is not from interview, this is from obituary, actually. Of course, she died in 2005. In another interview, she says that she was a good Jewish girl in a pro-Israel home. And all of my remaining family are, I would say, Zionist zealots. She said in the interview also in The Guardian. She is a very Jewish Jew, said the interviewer, Linda Grant. a British journalist and novelist who is Jewish herself. Dworkin even said once in the same interview to British Guardian, "I wanted to be the rabbi." In the long autobiographical essay she wrote in 1994, Dworkin says that she, and I quote, "began to think about survival very early, in part because we were Jewish on the heels of the Holocaust. And so, growing up Jewish," she later wrote, "informed her views on feminism." And I quote her, "Being a Jew, one learns to believe in the reality of cruelty, and one learns to recognize indifference to human suffering as a fact." This is from her interview in British Times. Well, just like Betty Friedan's comfortable concentration camp theory. Throughout high school, she was, to use her own words, from messing with men, earning through prostitution the money she needed for her frequent forays into Greenwich Village in New York, where she became acquainted with New York's bohemians, among them Allen Ginsberg, whom she greatly admired. Andrea Dworkin wrote actually very openly about the experience as a prostitute. She made frequent trips to New York, paying her bus fare, she said, by finding some stupid man and basically exchanged sex for money. This is how she puts it. In 1964, with scholarships and some loans taken out by her father, she went to Bennington College in Vermont, where she continued her erratic studies of literature and philosophy, distracting herself with drugs, sex, and politics. This I took from online Jewish Woman Encyclopedia. One of her favorite books at that time was Che Guevara's Guerrilla Warfare. "I read it 1,000,000 times, Dworkin told an interviewer in year 2000. I would plan attacks on the local shopping mall." Well, then she first hit the headlines in 1965 as a college freshman when she reported experiencing humiliating body searches at a women's detention center after arrest at the United Nations for protesting the Vietnam War. Her graphic description of her ordeal was then reported in newspapers across the world, and the downtown Bastille was subsequently closed down in New York. Well, as David Roberts says in his article titled "A Post-Mortem Analysis of Andrea Dworkin," published in April of 2005, and I quote, "In the detention center after her arrest, her clever mind figured out that if she told a pack of lies about the indignity of the way she was treated, she could attract attention. This plan worked so well that one sees her repeating this pattern for the rest of her life." End of quote. "Betachbulot ta'aseh lecha milchama." By way of deception, we should wage war. Well, she got so good at spinning this line that she was eventually invited to Harvard to lecture on patriarchal oppression. Such is the stuff that most women's studies programs in our colleges and universities are made of. But her parents, humiliated by the public scandal, turned against her, and in 1968, after graduating from Bennington, Andrea Dworkin moved to Amsterdam and married there some crazy Dutch anarchist, a man who would burn her with cigarettes